everyone, and welcome back to Business in the New Normal. I'm Joseph Rosales, and this is my co-host, Ike Devji. How are you today, Ike?
Good. Good to be with you again.
Thank you. Thank you. And we have our lovely guest, Lydia Lee, who we're going to be chatting with for the rest of the program. Hello, Lydia. How are you?
I'm good. Happy morning from Bali and great to see you guys again.
Thank you. Thank you. And we love your background. And by the way, that's not a virtual background, everybody. That's a real background. That's what you get.
I know everyone asked me that, but it's a good one. I should sell it to Zoom, right? It's usually sunnier. It's raining today, but that is usually a much brighter palm trees in the background.
That's great. It's great. Well, I always like to start off with just a little bit of a update about what's going on in our life here in Arizona. And as you all know, who follow the program, Ike is the business attorney. He specializes in helping people to protect their wealth and assets for their businesses. So, Ike, what's been going on in your world this past week?
We are working on a bunch of different issues. We've got tax time approaching. So tax planning sales season is in high swing. So one of the things that we're warning clients about is to be careful of the tax planning that they're buying and who they're buying it from and the legitimacy of that planning, because believe it or not, there are lots of neat stories out there about how you can save massive amounts of taxes that are not actually legal. And a lot of those things are sold at this time of year as well. So we're doing a lot of work in that area. We're answering questions on some of those things. And in fact, my article that just came out today is I do an asset protection checklist at the beginning of every year. And this year, this installment of it, in part 3, is the personal finance checklist. So we're advising people to fund their qualified plans so that those assets are protected. We're telling them to get ready for tax day, but to use tax planning and investments that are actually legitimate. And that's really been the focus of the last week or so, in addition to business transactions.
Okay. So how do people get that checklist?
The article is out today at Physicians Practice, where I have a column, so they can check there. They can look in my social media feeds on LinkedIn or Twitter. It will be there as well, and it will be pushed tomorrow with a little intro video from me explaining what the article is about in about 30 or 40 seconds. We give the high points.
And they can reach you on your social where?
They can reach me at Ike Devji on Twitter. They can reach me on LinkedIn or on my website, proassetprotection.com.
Okay, cool. Awesome. Checklists are my life. I love checklists. I want to know if I did this once, then I do it again. I'd use that same checklist, and you can add and take away things from the checklist. We're very involved with the Michael Gerber group in some work that we're doing, and that was really the person that back in 1994 when I met him really started teaching me about systems and checklists and process and how important they are. And we're buying an investment property right now down in Phoenix, and guess what? I'm immersed in my checklist. What has to be done by when and what dates, and I can check them off. And the next one we buy, then the next one after that, then it's just a checklist. So yeah, checklists are good. I know that we want to get to our guests in a second, and I just want to share that. We continue with my company. We just rebranded some things that I'm doing, Joseph Rosales International. So the Performance Group of Arizona is still there and doing work. And Joseph Rosales International is where we're going to be housing all my courses. You guys know that I launched the Leader Review recently. I'm a week or so away from launching the digital course. We're doing more digital courses, short, quick things that people can read and start doing immediately. Gone are the days of sitting in a 3, 4, 5 hour workshop or week-long workshop and getting brain overload and doing 10% of what you learn, if that. And so we're excited about that. So people can check that out, josephrosalesinternational.com, theleaderreview.com, another thing that we're doing. And I don't usually take time to promote, but leadership has become such an important issue in our lives today. I was on a podcast just earlier, I guess it was later last week, And we were talking about, we're all going to be led by something or someone. It's either events leading us or people leading us. And thank God if that's all going great for you, awesome, keep being led. But you know what? Most of us need to make better choices. Most of us need to be more informed. Most of us need to make our decisions about where we're going and how we're getting there on purpose, not by accident. And so, when I wrote The Leader of You, it originally started out to be an idea about how young people could become better, more effective leaders of themselves so they could help lead others later. And then it morphed into the business application. And that was, 15 years ago, 18 years ago, we started doing that. So The Leader of You has been around for a while, but, we recently wrote the book and I'm excited about it because people are saying, I'm getting back to the functional basics of being a better leader of myself, being more informed, having integrity, having trust, having all these pieces of what we call leadership essentials. So I want to encourage people to go check that out at theleaderofyou.com.
Start to become an even more effective leader immediately. Get your copy of The Leader of You at theleaderofyou.com.
But, so that's what I've been doing. I'm really excited about it. And I'm super excited to have our guest back. Lydia was with us last October and did such an amazing job of sharing really important information with all of our listeners that we immediately invited her back, said, when can you come back on? And February was the next day she had available. She's super busy. She lives in Bali, as you know. And Lydia Lee is the work in reinvention coach and small business strategist at Screw the Cubicle. I love the name of her company, Screw the Cubicle, and you'll know more about why she calls it that. Since 2013, she's helped hundreds of people transition out of the golden corporate handcuffs and develop successful self-employment strategies and create an impact in the work they want to do. Her mission has been to support new entrepreneurs and change makers to find the direction, pathway, courage, and clarity to make their business a 100% expression of their gifts, values, and personality. So all that, welcome back to the show, Lydia. It's so great to have you here with us again.
The last time we talked, we were like, we just need another hour.
I know, right?
When we dove deep, and it's like, we wished we could just have a little talk show about it, but I'm so glad to come on and dig even deeper with you guys today.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And it's 7 a.m. there in beautiful Bali, and it's 4 p.m. here in Phoenix, Arizona. And I love what we can do with technology, right?
Definitely.
So Lydia, I'm going to jump right into it. You've been helping clients all over the world, literally clients all over the world, to transition from that corporate job, that dead end, or that place where they're just not really being fulfilled, into owning the business of their dreams. So I'd like to just start with, maybe you tell us your story and how you came across the idea of Screw the Cubicle.
Well, I wish it was a sexier story, but actually it was kind of an accident. Aren't the best things usually come from sort of an accident, my first business was not Screw the Cubicle. I was in the international education industry, and this is where I left my business development director job there. And in throughout my transition, the safe route, or what I call sort of my transition business, right, was remaining actually in the industry and finding a place for myself in it as a consultant. So I owned a boutique agency, partnering with people from China, Taiwan, and parts of Asia, and bringing them into programs with my partner schools, in Canada, and promoting education in Canada. And that was actually the perfect gig for me to start with, because it's what I knew. I already had the contacts. I did a lot of work to have a great Rolodex of partners and people. And it was an really, really easy place for me to start a business around. And when I was going through my own transition of being an employee to an entrepreneur, as in your first year of business, I equate it to like 10 years of therapy because it really makes you look at a bunch of stuff about what you think you can do. And really just really puts you out there in a way that sometimes a job may not be able to do it, because you got to make up their own rules, which sounds really freeing, but also really scares the crap out of most people when you don't have a handbook, an employee handbook to look at to make your decisions, right? And so as I was going through my own personal transition of going, did I make the right decision? Did I have a midlife crisis too early, like my mother said? What were some of these experiences happening throughout this transition? I started a blog called Screw the Cubicle with the only intention to share the journey, share the questions I'm asking myself, and really just to have a place for my family to stop bugging me on phone calls about what I was doing with my life, and instead get on the blog and listen to what I was sort of documenting, almost like an online diary, for the first few months. And it wasn't until people started reading the blog unintentionally. I wasn't really promoting it that largely at the time. And my first client actually that prompted the fact that this could be something I could be paid to do was a lawyer from Toronto, that said, I've been reading your story, even though I'm a bit older than you, a lot of what you've been going through in your own shifts of understanding what you want. And, that whole thing where I talked about, sometimes you climb the corporate ladder and the view just isn't what you're expecting, which is a disappointment. And there's a sense of like, do I throw the baby out of the bathwater? Do I completely not do what I used to do? Do I start over, or do I do some sort of evolving, in my body of work to do something more meaningful? And so a lot of that message resonated with a lot of readers, which then prompted them, like this Toronto lawyer, to ask, could you help me make that transition? And I never thought about that being a career path. It wasn't on part of my resume. So, but she was the first person that planted the seed for me, which allowed me to work with someone who gave me that permission to work with them. And that then became obviously my full-time gig for the last 7 years.
Wow. What it's amazing, because the title of our program is Business in the New Normal, and millions of people have had to transition out of jobs, in many cases not by choice, but
Right.
forced out of their job, companies closing or whatever, downsizing. And so there are many people listening right now that are going to be really interested in that journey, because even though they might have started this whole new phase in their life differently, they're still going to have to evolve into something that's super satisfying and successful for them. And I don't know what success means to different people, but I know that you got to be doing something that you love and you're successful at, or you're going to not love it and not be successful at it, and that sucks, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's interesting. So you mentioned that in your website you have something called identity shifts, and you mentioned it just a moment ago. And reimagining a new way of working and living in the new future of work. Tell us more about that.
Well, we're certainly going through a version of that forcefully, as an entire nation, and of course around the world globally. And it's funny because my own reinvention came from a pain. I had a massive burnout during a business trip. I think I talked about it in my last interview with you guys. In Moscow, in Russia, where I had a complete panic attack and developed temporary agoraphobia in my hotel room from working so many hours and years without taking a holiday. And I think my story isn't unique. There's a lot of people that believe that to get to a version of success, right? As you mentioned it, we have to sweat blood and tears to get there, and that's what our peers have done. That's what our parents have done. It teaches us what we believe we have to do, right? To be acknowledged and be successful in our lives. And so sometimes reinvention kind of comes from, or identity shifts and reinventions can come from things like burnout, right? A health scare, a divorce, being laid off, right? Something that majorly happened. But sometimes if some of us are conscious enough, of shifts in our lives, it is very natural to know and to obviously acknowledge that we all go through different stages of life where we evolve into our next chapters of our lives, in whether we're in our 20s, in our 30s, in our 40s. I mean, I definitely remember what I wanted in my 20s is very different from what I wanted in my 30s. And now that I'm closer to my 40s, that's continuing to evolve. It sort of never stops, right? This evolving and next chapters. The difference is whether we go kicking and screaming, right? Or as you mentioned in the beginning of this podcast, are you being led by societal expectations or the status quo of what you've been taught? Or are you the one consciously leading your life so that you are creating the experience you actually want to have and feel good about choices that you're making, right? But as we said, the choices are having choices is freeing, but can be daunting. as well, because there is no guidebook for us to know what is the right life for me to lead. Because when you're a lawyer, when you're a doctor, when you're an academic, you just have to look back at who did it before you, right? To follow the path, and that feels safe. But to do something different in a way that's on your terms, that takes a little bit more thinking, a little bit more of knowing thyself in order for us to know what's the right path for us. And I think during these sorts of different life stages and shifts, we are also internally shifting our values to what's important to us that may not be important to us before. Right? The pandemic has been a great example of that. The minute people started spending time with their families at home, the minute people started being able to take a walk and maybe put some of their health in priority, because they can, because of the autonomy of time now. All of a sudden, that's normalized, and I want more of that. I may not want to go back to the office as usual, even when we are supposed to. So people are having these sorts of thoughts about, well, I may not want to go back to work as usual, but what is the alternative for me? What am I able to take in what I've learned through the pandemic of what's important to me, my family, and my values, and be able to potentially renegotiate a new reality of what a career looks for me, right? I work with a lot of women, for example, that are high-powered careers, but they want to raise a family and they want to be very present for the baby for the first 3 years. And also fathers, right? In a lot of places in America, we don't have paternity leave, right? In Europe, they do. And so those values are also, put on women, right? To be the ones to take care of family. And then we have a choice that we have to make. Men may not have to make those choices as often and worry about whether their jobs will be taken or not, but women do. That's a very real reality for females in high-powered positions. And so the conventional career doesn't always support these shifts and choices that we want to make in alignment with those values, because there's a real threat to our position, to our authority that we've created for so many years. So whenever I think about the concept of screw the cubicle, it's not always about the fact that you leave your jobs. Actually, some of my clients don't leave jobs. They actually reinvent the way that they look at a job or what they accept in a job, that it's more of a mindset. The cubicle to me is a conception of a jail cell in your mind of what you believe is possible, what you've been taught to do. And in the world that you want to live in, how do you create the nuance, in how you create those opportunities rather than wait for them, to present itself to you. And I think we're in a very blessed time where, we're talking, I'm on a completely different continent, we're in completely different time zones, right? Technology has brought a lot of opportunities and access, right, to more creative ways that we can earn a living, with what we do, with global opportunities of clients that are no longer needed to be just in our communities. And that is a very different thing of what education in schools and in our communities haven't adapted towards yet. The world has changed, but I don't believe our education system has changed to adapt to those opportunities.
I think it's also really interesting. You've talked about the path to making these changes. And one thing that I see with the very successful people that I work with, which is I'm sure the same for both of you, I'll guess, is that we work with people who are high performing, all of us in different capacities. And those people are used to being good at something right off the bat, right? And even if it took them years to achieve their current level of success, and once they're at that level of success, the idea of starting down a path of gradual change, a path to that new goal, rather than a jump to, hey, today I'm in a cubicle, but tomorrow I want to be sitting where Lydia is with, in Bali with the Garden of Eden behind me. I'm guessing that wasn't a single step for you. I'm guessing that was a process. And that process, you may have had many steps into finding how to do what you're doing, where to do what you're doing, and make all of the changes that we've all made in different ways over the last 12 months, right? We've all gone through this global paradigm shift over the last year of how we're doing what we do, where we're doing it, how we're leading others, all of these different things. So how can you tell us maybe some specific stories of some of the clients that you've worked with that can show people that path and that trajectory? Because I sometimes feel that high performing, successful people believe that they will always jump from one success directly into another, even though they came up wherever they are the hard way and spent time doing it. Once we've reached this plateau, we feel that every move is lateral. And I don't know that that's the case. And can you share some of your thoughts on that and maybe some specific examples?
Yeah, I'm so glad you bring this up, because a lot of times when we do listen to podcasts and interviews and features on Forbes, we only hear about the paradise, right? The after, right? Like what it looks like at the end of the rainbow. But the process and how everyone has gotten to their own version of success, that's not sometimes the sexy story, right? Because there's failures in there, and there's a lot of mistakes that are made that made things clearer and more successful for that person. And I think, for my own journey, it wasn't an overnight concept for me that, hey, living in Bali, I might be more happy. It certainly wasn't. To me, it actually came from just a pain of that Vancouver wasn't a very expensive place to start a business, and I was taking clients I didn't want to take in my business in order to afford to live in that place. And it took me multiple, sort of experiments, if you will, with traveling and picking different spots to work from in tiny, little exploration adventures in order to build up the courage to sell all my stuff one day in 2014 and decide to come here for 6 months, which obviously now turned into 7 years, right? I never anticipated what that future looked like. And I think whenever I speak to my clients who are in mid-level to high-level, positions in their corporations, it is a hard identity to let go of, because there's authority there. There's a feeling of respect and, what people think of them, oh, you're not being a lawyer anymore. How do I introduce you at a dinner party? That title, we're so, it's part of our identity to say that I am a doctor, I am a lawyer, I am this and that if you said anything different, it feels very much like a part of yourself has been taken away from you. Right. And sometimes that might not be the case. And what I say to my clients is that actually you're building a body of work. It's not that you are jumping ship and being unreliable, right? We are, the creative portfolio career of the future is about understanding how you grow from each role, and actually how each of your job roles have a thread that binds them together, and how you narrate that story, how you tell that story, how you actually be able to spread that message of that. This is what I learned from each career that helped me to build something bigger and more impactful in my next chapter of this work. But it's still all me. I'm not giving up anything to start anew, right? But you're absolutely right about the notion of people thinking that I have to start from scratch, and I'm not willing to do that after all the things that I've done. Because one of the projects and challenges I give to my clients is to give themselves a self-made internship. So especially when they're doing something that doesn't feel exactly what they used to do, is a version of it, it's a piece of what they used to do, but they've never done it in this capacity before. And that's okay, because we need to build mastery, we have to build experience. And I always question them and I say, remember the time when you graduated from university to go to a law firm or wherever you wanted to work, and you had to take an internship? When you work from a place where you discover what part of law did you want to stay in, right? You didn't question that because everybody else was doing it. So you didn't feel that it was a detrimental activity to you, right? But when as adults, we feel that we're supposed to know it all. We're supposed to just get it all right. And we don't fail very well as adults because of the fear of respect for ourselves and from other people's judgment of our own behaviors, right? So getting someone to do a self-made internship, it's not that they can't do it. It's what they perceive it means to their identity, and to what it is that they've built. But self-made internships are perfect for that imperfect action of exploring what version of my work am I most called to do at this point in my life. And I'm not going to be able to do that unless I actually work with some real humans. So some examples that I have that has occurred most commonly with my clients is actually giving themselves permission, just like I did, when that woman from Toronto said, "Could you coach me?" And I said, "What is a coach?" I didn't know. And I could easily have said, well, if I don't know what that is, I'm not allowed to do it, right? And then that's over for the dream. But instead I said, well, let me explore if this is something I would like to do. And what does coaching, how would I want to make coaching meaningful for me? Because at that point, I thought coaching kind of meant very therapeutic, and I'm way too blunt to be a therapist. So is that what I want to do? And so I had to kind of go, how would I coach? How would I help? What would I help with? What are the boundaries of topics I will talk about and I won't talk about, right? And I took on 8 guinea pigs as clients for the first 2 months of my coaching business for free because I wanted to learn as an exchange for giving this advice and seeing if it does impact people beyond myself, right? And so my clients do the same things. They create what I call this sort of beta test month or beta test 2 months, depending on their type of work. And they just give themselves permission to help unconditionally without it meaning that that's the business they need to start or this is exactly right, but to learn from that experience to inform them on what the scope of work should be. Right. So that's one way of finding out what should I do with my life in my next chapter by simply doing the work and not having the website up, not doing the things you think you need to do to have a business, but simply just helping another human authentically. Right. The secondary stuff. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, what an interesting idea. It's a great concept. I love it.
Yeah. And testing doesn't always have to be a business idea. Like I think whenever people think about independent work and entrepreneurship is that, oh, it has to be a business. And a lot of my clients don't actually have a business. They don't want a business. They maybe would like to be a consultant with just a few clients a year that stick with them for many, many years. And they don't need a big brand. It's not, necessary sometimes for people to earn a great living without having a big branded business or a big empire. And that's one way of redefining independent work. And so that reminds me of, one of my clients, Tracy, who has been with me for many years. She was in a packaging engineering industry, working at a job for many, many years, and decided that she wants to be independent because what was she doing? It was a sports called mule racing. She races donkeys up mountains, and that was her hobby. And she didn't have any time to do the mule racing. And that was something she wanted to do and wanted more flexibility to live in certain states and to live in certain places around the year and then do her mule racing. And so one of the first things we experimented with was, could we negotiate actually for your current employer to be your first consulting client? And how do we make that a win-win situation where they get more out of you as a consultant and also you get to choose, right, the projects that you want to take on and be able to give way more impactful work than doing a variety of lots of work in one role, right? And that was a test. We didn't know if that was going to work or not, but it did work after, strategically knowing how to pitch that. And then eventually that client became a 2-year consulting client at part-time hours, making her the same full-time hours for full-time pay that she used to have before. And today she has a $200,000 a year consulting business working with just a handful of clients. She doesn't have a website. She doesn't have a LinkedIn profile. A lot of it came from her own personality type of referrals, intimate. She's an introvert, so she has a very different way of marketing and getting clients, right? And so building that independent work or independent version of entrepreneurship, I think is very personal to everybody. So it's really necessary, I think, to take a pause to kind of understand, what am I building? What is it all for? And how do I want to do it in a way that feels meaningful to me?
You really have expanded my whole perspective on the cubicle, because when you say screw the cubicle, it sounds leave the cubicle. It doesn't necessarily mean leave the cubicle. It might mean redesign your cubicle. It might mean redesign how you engage that business. And I think that's that whole reinvention. There's such a term now that everybody uses so much that people don't want to almost hear it anymore. Pivoting. I pivoted. And I get it, and I know what people mean by that. But there's a deeper approach to it, and that's, what's going to make you happy, and what's going to make you fulfilled, and what's going to produce the best work for you. And we've all heard people say, if you can find something you love to do and you get paid for it, there's the best job in the world. And I like the idea, the experiment, if you will, that you don't have to start the business and do the website and do the social media stuff and get all the clients. Do the work first. See if you like it. What a simple but very powerful concept. Do the work first. See if you like it. And if you do, then maybe you can ease into something. And you don't have to leave your job necessarily. But that's great.
Definitely.
It's great stuff, Lydia.
I think also another piece that I think we aren't encouraged to do as adults, we do that a lot in our youth days, and especially when we're graduating from school, et cetera. You know, we have career counselors, right? And we have assessments and so forth to help us find our next career. But when we're adults, we sort of believe that the thing we end up going for after university or college is the thing forever. You know, and so there's less of an opportunity, or we don't curate that opportunity for us to question whether or not this is still the current path I want to go, or is there, how can I take these skills and potentially repurpose it, you know, towards a different direction? And this is what I find a lot in very traditional careers like academia. You know, I work with a lot of teachers, a lot of professors at universities that don't believe that what they've known how to do can be done outside of an academic sphere, right? But what I do to help them is sort of break down, well, forget about academia and where you did it for a minute, and really look at your skill sets isolated from that place, right? As a professor, as someone who teaches, you have teaching abilities. You understand how to turn complicated ideas to a simple manner to teach it. You understand how to deal with different learning styles, you know, and learning and education can be absolutely repurposed into different directions. I mean, we all do it, right? In our work at the moment, in our businesses, of educating and planting seeds to help people do better things in the world. That doesn't change, you know, for someone who's in an academic position and going, what would I want to teach potentially that would be not about urban planning or whatever it is that I might have graduated from. And actually, quite interestingly enough, most of my teachers, teaching clients, actually become people that teach other people how to teach, because that's also a version of your scope of work, is that you don't have to be so literal about teaching everything that you know how to do in your degree. It's about just the skill of teaching, the skill of education, the skill of understanding how people think and absorb information in itself is it could be a career path to give to someone else who actually wants to be a course creator, wants to be to run webinars online. You could lend that skill to help people teach better and impact more people with that talent.
Oh, so we're going to come to the end of our time, and I'm like, we need another hour.
I know, we always say that.
At least, and it's interesting, but you know, I want to get a couple more questions and then tie up here. But you know, so what do you see as the greatest challenges that people are facing right now? That the people that come to you, what are they challenged with that they want to make a change about, and you know, how do you help them with that?
I think that the number one thing is this fear of uncertainty. And I think we've definitely experienced a lot of that individually during a time of the pandemic, when we don't have the answers for when things will go back to normal, and that we have to get creative in how we normalize what this looks like in our lives, right? And whether it's fear of uncertainty of money, right? Fear of uncertainty of whether or not I'll make it, whether or not my wife will get mad at me if this doesn't work, right? Whatever it may be, it is hard for us to imagine going after and having a motivation perhaps to go after things that aren't completely set in stone, you know? And that is the part that I think holds people back a lot, because we are waiting for that perfect idea. We're waiting for the perfect time for our kids to go back to school or whatever that might look like in order for us to have that permission to start. Right. And so that's why a lot of the philosophy that I take with any of my programs or my coaching experiences is always on a weekly, daily level. How do we take imperfect action? What's one imperfect thing that I can do today, not for the outcome, but for the process of learning about who I am and learning about the way that I want to do something, or sometimes put things to bed if it's necessary. That's also relieving, not to keep on wondering what if. Just to do it, and it's not going to kill you. You know, if you did it in a safe manner, don't remortgage your house, and don't just quit your job on the fly, but do it on the side. Test it out like a little side hustle. You know, a little testing internship, and you don't even have to tell anyone about it. You know, just pick a few people you want to help with and do it quietly if that is something that feels safer for you, right? And then the other part, as we talked about today, is that their title is their identity. You know, that and perhaps needing to embrace that actually my identity is more than just my job. My identity is more just my title. And so I need to start to know, like learn how to talk about my career and talk about the story of my work in a much more high level way than just, I'm a doctor and I hope you know what that is. You know, you can talk a lot about the purpose of why you decided to be a doctor. What are your main, higher purpose of your work that has a ripple effect to a bigger cause that isn't tied to a particular vocation or a business, but could be multiple projects that you put into your scope of work that helps you to get towards that journey of creating more impact. And then lastly, I think the mindset of knowing that you don't have to start a business or an independent career like anyone else, because a lot of the success stories you see out there is bigger is always better. So there's a misconception that unless I had a team of 10 and a famous brand and all these glitzy things of what we call a business in our social media channels and our website, unless I do that, I'm not going to be successful. And I think we have to get back to the more holistic way of running a business, which is that a business is profitable if you can solve problems, if you can help people do something that they desire to do that's urgently needed right now. And if you can be that bridge to solve that problem, then you can be a business owner and you can run that business in a way that is aligned, right, with your genius zone and your strengths, your values, and your personality. But you do need to be present for that decision rather than, even though I know you love checklists, Joseph, it can't be just any checklist. It's got to be your checklist so that you're building a business you actually want to keep and not just making a lot of money, but actually hating your job. And then you have to fire yourself as the boss.
Yeah. Well, we're coming to the end. Ike, any thoughts in your mind you want to ask Lydia about before we bring ourselves to a close?
Oh, you're muted.
Lydia's touched on a lot of important issues that have me thinking about the combination of where we started the conversation, talking about a checklist and then developing a plan and being able to make this transition. Lydia, so let's say somebody who's listening is successful at what they do, and for whatever reason, they are stuck in the cubicle, physical, emotional, mental, psychological, whatever that cubicle looks like for them. What's a good first step in taking a step outside that and looking at these things from the 10,000 foot view and figuring out how, what that transition should be? What's the catalyst that they need, and how do they start this process?
I'm a big believer in starting slow, so that we ease ourselves into the courage of doing bigger things. Most of us aren't built to just jump off a cliff and hope the parachute opens. I certainly am not, and still am not. I think when we feel dissatisfaction is an opportunity for us to figure out what is misaligned, because we won't know what the next chapter is and what the destination is, and that's what we always strive to find. What's the answer? When I know the answer, then I'll make a move, right? But that may not be the first question to be had. What we do know, what's much easier to know is what isn't working. What is causing me the pain and sadness? What is causing me the I don't want to go to work today, or the conflicts I'm having at work, or what does that look like? And to pick that apart and go, is it the work itself that isn't causing me joy, or is it the way I'm doing that work or forced to do that work that's not causing me joy? Or is it that someone's micromanaging me and I need more autonomy? Or is it that I wish I had more than 2-week vacation days because I need more for my family and for my well-being? And so questioning what is causing that misalignment, causing that sense of dissatisfaction is a great place to start, because I always say that we can know what we don't want more than we know what we want. But what we don't want can lead us to understanding what is important to us, and then start to go, what are the cards I get to play? Are there room for negotiations with my current place to better my position? Or is that, because we only have 3 choices. We either just shut up and deal with it and not complain, right? Or we start to see if we can make a change by having hard conversations with our bosses or whoever is causing us that pain, or renegotiating to different parts of the scope of work, as some of my clients have done. Or the last choice is to leave. If none of those other two choices are going to be realistic for you, right? But at least you know you've done what you needed to do to improve, right, the conditions of your work. So whether or not I think you want to be an entrepreneur or not, if you still have a job to help you pay the bills, it is important to actually improve that conditions for yourself as much as possible. Whether sometimes is your own attitude of how you enter the workplace that's causing you that immense dissatisfaction as well. And if those things are improved, then it gives you a much more spaciousness in your mind to think about alternative possibilities. But if we're consistently in burnout, consistently in being exhausted, it's really hard to dream bigger, right? So think smaller scale, think about the day-to-day happiness of what I can be in control about, rather than, I'm not in control and I just need to quit my job, which may not be the best motivation in order for you to start anew.
Well, thank you. That's a really important and such a simple and clear answer, and an actionable answer, that it was so glaring that it was easy to overlook, which is identify what you don't want. That's very important, I think, in knowing what you need to change and what you need to avoid when you make that identity shift. So
Definitely.
that makes sense. Thank you.
So how can our listeners reach out to you and see some of your work, some of the programs you have, or contact you directly?
Well, my website is the best place to start, and it's easily memorable. Screwthecubicle.com. That is sort of the place, and there's a big yellow button on the top called Start Here. And this is a place which is sort of the welcome for most people that are new to me and the concepts of my work. And this is sort of where I publish sort of my most popular articles, depending on the category that you would like, whether you're going through a career reinvention, or you're starting a business, or you're thinking about lifestyle freedom, what that looks like for you. They're all kind of categorized in detail, so that you can pick and choose your adventure. But in that page as well, there are some great trainings for free. That is a great place to start. So one of the most favorite trainings is called the Reinvent Yourself training, which is actually a lot in line with what we're talking about today, which is actually just take a pause in going, what don't I want? What is actually some of the things that I want to from scratch craft for myself, the ingredients for what is actually meaningful for me before I make a jump. We have to understand first what why we're making that jump, but also so that we can make conscious decisions about all these different options that we have, right? We're always filled with the paradox of choice. That's sometimes what keeps us from taking the leap. So that training kind of helps you question and prompts you on what you should be really thinking about, what you should be challenging yourself to question yourself on at this time of a crossroad in your life.
Well, thank you. And I encourage our listeners, please, if you're in a place where you're uncertain, which many people are, or you know that there's more for you and you just don't know how to get there, then this is a full endorsement from me. Reach out to Lydia. Look at some of her material. Look at some of her trainings. They're free. She's done them so that way she can touch more people. And if you reach out to her directly and work with her directly, please. I mean, I guess the comment is, don't be where you are because that's where you are. Be there because that's where you want to be. Don't be successful by accident. Be successful on purpose. And successful means a lot of different things. It doesn't just mean about the money you make. It means the happiness that you bring to yourself and to others around you. So I want to again thank Lydia for taking the time to be with us today. You're always such an inspiration to myself and to everybody that's listening. And I know that we all can be in a better place where we want to be. And I always say even more successful, even happier, even more free time. We can all have even more of what we're looking for. We just sometimes have to be clear about what that is that we're looking for. Right. So
Definitely. Yeah.
So Lydia, thank you again. Ike, any closing comments, my friend?
I think we've got a lot to think about. And I think that even if you're not stuck in that cubicle, you can do what you're doing better and be happier doing it by using these same concepts that we're talking about.
Amen. And
Definitely. Thank you so
this,
much for having this conversation, because I think it affects people who are employees and also people who are entrepreneurs. You know, we all want happiness. We all want fulfillment in whatever vehicle that we do it in. And I certainly have to have the same talk with myself in terms of making decisions for, my life and my business, because it matters to me that those two are aligned also.
yeah, well, again, Lydia, thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure to have you on again. Ike, thank you, my friend, for always being there and for the work you're doing for Business in the New Normal and all the postings. Go to our LinkedIn, our Facebook sites, Business in the New Normal. Check out the things we're doing. These episodes will be here as well. And so with that, I'll say thank you so much again this week, everybody. I'm Joseph Rosales from my co-host Ike Devji, our guest Lydia Lee. Have a great, awesome week. Bye-bye.